anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly. This case I'm bringing to you today is captivating because it's here that I will share with you that I belong to Actors Equity Association as a production stage manager, and that is a professional union for actors and stage managers. So I will be offering a lot of my opinions, and they do not represent AEA's position at all. I will typically in this story refer to them as simply equity because it's just easier. And we're going to talk about Broadway's Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark debacle. So prior to this nuts story full of rules that I'm going to explain as we go, Sam, what's our question this week?
Well, knowing the topic for today, what is your favorite Broadway show?
Gosh. Oh, I should have known you'd ask me something like that. Okay. So I've worked so many that it's hard to pick, but I would say I want to say Hamilton because it's too easy, but it's such a good show.
I say it's always so good.
It's just really good. Like I can't deny it. I'm not gonna deny
And like it holds a special place in our heart, but like
yes,
we did it because we enjoyed it and like we loved the show.
Yes, that's where we applied. That's where so I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say that I don't love Hamilton. I do.
And for those of you who might not know, we worked together on a Hamilton project, and that's how we met.
Yes.
So it holds a special place in our heart because of that.
It does. And I think that, coming from the angle we were at, it just is kind of takes true to real life because we were literally working. I mean, we weren't working the show, but we were working Hamilton.
We were completely surrounded by it all day, every day.
Oh yeah. But I would say outside of Hamilton right now on Broadway, I have a lot of opinions, and some of my opinions are not going to be popular because, like me, I mean, I get it. We're all diehard. Like when we want Broadway, we want Broadway. And I think right now there's too many jukebox musicals happening, which is where they just pick a band and it's the band songs and they form like a story around it.
Yeah, that's really popular at the moment.
Yeah, I don't like it. I just think it's lazy. that's so
I've never seen a show like that, so I don't really have much of an opinion.
It's so cavalier of me to say that it's lazy for them to do a jukebox musical and arrange it that way. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into the arrangements and that sort of thing, but I think that we're losing a lot of the original productions.
I think a big difference would be if, depending on the story they create out of the songs.
Right.
Like if they can create a really great story using those songs, I think that's pretty cool. And I would really enjoy that. Yeah. But if it's just to just throw the songs together and get the hits out there, there's a lot depending on that to make it good. But if you make a story good, then I'm in.
I have in two sides of the coin there, like Mamma Mia, that's gonna run forever. Because they didn't just do ABBA, they were also like, who's this girl's father? That's a pretty good story.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like that created a really good plot and narrative outside of the music.
Yeah. And then the opposite of that for me is I think it's just called MJ and it's the new Michael Jackson musical. And
is there a new one? I haven't heard about that one yet.
It's just the songs. I don't know. What I would say right now is if you are in New York City and you have the ability to purchase a ticket, which is a whole nother conversation. If you have the ability to purchase a ticket, I would tell you to go see Moulin Rouge.
I would love to see that. I've never seen that.
I want to see it so bad. I've heard it's incredible. a friend, I've worked at several theaters, obviously, and I had a friend who went, and she said it was absolutely incredible that they had like a full size like elephant head, like in the movie, like
Oh, really?
all adorned with jewels and everything. Yeah. And when Satine first comes in, she's the main character, the sparkling diamond, y'all. She does like pretty much exactly what the film did. She comes in like on a diamond swing and sings. Like I've heard it's incredible. But again, that's actually a jukebox musical.
Yeah, it is. Again, and it just tells a good story.
Yeah, it's just different artists. So for like original stuff, definitely I've heard Come From Away is incredible, which is about a bunch of people who are stranded. Their flight has been grounded because 9/11 has just happened. And so there are people from all countries who were like connecting on a flight, and they meet, and that's the premise of the musical.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I've heard it's incredible. And another one I've heard is incredible is A Strange Loop. I'm not sure if that closed. I hope it didn't. They keep closing really good stuff. But A Strange Loop, if I'm not mistaken, even won a Pulitzer.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, its whole tagline basically was it's a big black queer musical. And I'm like, I love it.
Right?
I love it. I haven't seen it. But getting into the Broadway version of Spider-Man is a lot to unpack. So, first, there won't be any murder today, thankfully. I think we've all been through enough after my last episode. Only injuries were sustained, but there were some serious ones. And second, I'm going to clarify what I said in the introduction. This may be repetitious. The professional company of actors on Broadway all belong to Equity, which is the union that I mentioned. And those theaters on Broadway are considered equity houses that operate under union rules. So, and sometimes you might get a director of a regional production that might get Equity's approval to like direct, but not perform.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like, so one way to do it is as you grow through your theater career, every time you work in an equity theater, but you are non equity, you are given quote unquote points, which are equity membership candidacy points. So for every week you work there, you accrue points. And once your position is secured at an equity theater where you intend to earn points, meaning you've signed the contract with them, you are then required to complete 50 weeks of being on the job at that theater to gain enough points for your equity card.
Okay.
And just to give you a little visibility into that, that's a really long time.
Well, yeah, you're not doing a show every single week of the year. So it's when shows are happening and you're working on them.
Yeah, a lot of theater, equity theater too, that is accessible, like accessible equity houses tend to be what's called like summer stock theater, where they're
Mm-hmm.
open, yeah, they're open air areas where they do equity productions with equity stage managers.
And they're seasonal.
Yes, they're very seasonal. So you could start this position, you could have this contract signed, and they might say, okay, we get you for 50 weeks. You're working Hamilton, and at the end of the 50 weeks, you have your equity card. And, or you could gig at a storefront theater. Well, no, you can't do that because it has to be an equity house. So if you go to an equity house for summer stock and it's 3 months, you accrue only those weeks of points.
Like the 12 weeks of the 3 months. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Another avenue is you can be in a sister union and you can receive your card that way. And I believe what they mean by a sister union here is if you belong to like SAG-AFTRA, like if you're a
Mm-hmm.
television performer, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you've like done your work to get that card.
Yeah, and you sort of see that happening now where a lot of like Jake Gyllenhaal just did Sunday in the Park with George a little bit ago, and I heard it was great.
Yeah, I've seen a few different celebrities do Broadway, and
Yes,
they
yeah.
would have done that.
Yeah, because you get the people who are EGOTs, they
Hmm.
get the Tony too, because they belong to the sister union, so they can essentially just kind of walk in. But the easiest way to do it is to book an equity show in an equity position at an equity house, and then that equity house buys your card for you.
Yeah, 'cause cards are expensive,
Correct, correct.
and they're
Yes,
like a
so
yearly fee
yes.
for the renewals.
Yes, I pay my dues every year. Yeah, I haven't stage managed in a while, but I pay my dues just in case, you know. I have the card in my wallet, I mean, sometimes people are who knows, somebody at the DMV might ask. But so this is arguably the easiest way is to and it sucks because it's like somebody who knows somebody and they buy you their or buy you
Hmm.
your card rather. And that's how I started in the union. And actually, though, in my defense, I had accrued enough points in my college career, but it had been a certain amount of years since my college career. So, like, I had left for Chicago from Ohio. And, like, I don't know where those points were living. I don't know what happened.
Hmm.
I had accrued enough, but I moved to Chicago. I went back to see a show, and a director who I had worked with several times, she was the artistic director, was like, listen, we need somebody for the big musicals. What you know about joining equity? And I said, okay. So I did. And
Yeah.
so at some point, a nebulous point, I had enough points. Like I worked there every summer as like an intern and ASM, an assistant stage manager. Like, I, oh man, it's so hot. It was so hot.
Mm.
That's all I remember. It's just so hot. Because of course, I'm speaking of when I was working backstage. So typically, you're in all blacks, running blacks, which are different from dressing in all black. Your running blacks, you literally need to have like black on black Converse.
Yeah, you need like no way to reflect light.
Yes, no, yeah, you can't have like a pair of black Converse with white. Like, no, that's not. If you're the assistant stage manager, the stage manager can like say you can get in trouble and say like, "What the hell's going on here? Your socks aren't black," and you're like, "God, my life." But as a PSM, you're up in the booth area, and I actually still wore all black because I'd gotten used to it working backstage, and it's way easier.
Well, if you need to like step in and support in any way.
Yes, correct, correct. And we'll talk a little bit about when and where you have to do that. And I should also mention here that, like I said, it's a labor union, and it's just for theater performers and for the stage managers. The union for film is SAG-AFTRA, like we just mentioned, and you might remember they recently went on strike, and they didn't break it. They did a good job. Good for them. And there is an entirely separate union for stage crew hands who are not production stage managers, and it is called IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. So the difference is, as a production stage manager, you are in equity because you are in every rehearsal, every single one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like you're the first one there, you're the last one out. You are taking the blocking, you are all kinds of things. So you are working the same amount of hours and essentially putting in the same labor as the performer. Whereas IATSE members come on once the show is ready to be performed.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so you might wonder why there aren't union actors in every production. And that is because the Union of Professional Performers and Stage Managers are barred from performing in a non union theater.
Yeah, it's like once you get that certification, you're required to
Yes.
kind of stay within your level.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. So, like what I said before, storefront, that is just kind of a jargony slang term for any independent theater, which there are a ton of in Chicago. That's why
Oh,
I
yeah.
moved here,
A lot of cities have them. If you have a
Yeah.
theater in your city, there's a good possibility that they're not equity. If you're like in a small town or
Oh,
something.
yes. Yes, there's a very good possibility. And which means I can't work, unfortunately. So, a Broadway performer or stage manager who belongs to the union cannot perform or stage manage at regional shows or, like I said, the storefront ones. They can appear at equity houses only. And that's the basics of how equity works. And you can see that it's kind of a double edged sword there,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, theater really wants you to gig around, and you can't really gig around when you're equity because a lot of equity houses already have stage managers that they work with.
Well, it's very much when you're getting your equity card, it's very much career oriented. And
Mhm.
it's not that if you're working in a storefront theater that it's not.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just it's kind of like you're put in a different pay class or like
Yes.
a weight class in boxing or something. It's like this is you have to be within here because this is within your kind of, I don't want to say skill set because that doesn't mean that yeah, like
You've got it exactly correct. It works on to go just like a little bit more into it, it works on a tier system of theaters. Each equity house has a different tier of equity. So,
mhm.
the one I was working at is an outdoor performance space. It's not a Broadway house. So that would be a different contract, still under equity, but you're in a different tier. So even once you
Yeah.
get the card, you're still,
You're not done. There's still work to do.
yeah, you're not done. And this is also the moment when I wanted to add in that I've seen some phenomenal regional productions,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
fantastic
Some
ones.
of the favorite shows I've ever been to have been from storefront theaters.
Yes, yes, agreed. Because your local storefront theater, wherever you may be listening to this, it may likely be producing new work, which is super cool to support and sometimes really neat.
Yeah, when I first moved to Chicago, I worked for one,
Hmm.
and they did a competition every year of one acts to then bring on whatever show won
Right.
on for a
Yeah.
full run, and that was our whole like setup as a business.
Yeah. 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 And it's very encouraged in that atmosphere to bring the new work. And I think that's why it's super important. And that's why it's a double edged sword because I'm like, I would like to go and work and support new theater, but I am not able to do that or I am in violation of equity rules.
You just got to go as an audience member,
Yes, no, yes, I
support it that way.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen phenomenal regional productions of musicals and plays and original works, and it's all over. But let's get into Broadway's Spider-Man. So, like I just told you, Broadway is a tier, we're talking like top tier, we're talking the contracts where people are actually making money to be an actor, which is hard to do, folks.
Yes, it definitely is. I had a roommate who was also a stage manager, and it did not pay the bills. Like she had to have another
Oh,
full time job. It
yep.
was a ton of work.
Oh my God, dude. It is so hard. When you don't have your equity card, it is so hard. Like you're working storefront at the evening rehearsals and your day job during the day to make sure you make rent. And then you got to get to the storefront and you're there all night and closing it. And you're getting paid like nothing. But they're storefront. They can't, that's not the environment. That's not the contract you signed,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and you need to find a day job that lets you have that schedule to
Right.
be there at like 4 p.m.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
prep for
4 or
like a
5.
5 p.m. rehearsal.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, okay, I do this. And I'm not accusing anyone of not doing this. But I was an ASM at the storefront theater at the time. And if you work with me and I am part of the crew, every single day that stage is going to get swept and mopped. Every single day. Because you don't know if somebody has been in the theater working and has left a nail or has left a, I found all kinds of garbage. Like nails, screws, dead birds, so much stuff.
Do most shows not do that? Because every show I've worked on has.
Almost every show I've worked on has. I'm not going to say which one. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that can happen when you're not in an equity house. If you're in an equity house, it is usually 100% likely that that stage is going to be swept and mopped every day. That's why you get there early and you set your props, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Spider-Man. We're talking Spider-Man on Broadway. So it would logically follow that it's on Broadway and probably all the performers are equity, which means a larger sum in their contract. And Spider-Man was dealing with a flock of equity members and also trying to produce elaborate stage effects. And a lot of those stage effects did not work.
That's not good. See, I don't really know much about this. I just know that stuff happened.
It happened, yeah. And so this resulted in Turn Off the Dark. That's the full name was Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. So I'll refer to it probably back and forth. But it resulted in it being the most expensive musical in Broadway history, with the budget clocking in at $75 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is wild compared to the typical 5 to 15 million for a Broadway musical, according to the New York Times.
Wow, that's a ton more.
That's insane. And also, according to the New York Times, the production Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark was burning $1.3 million every week of shows.
Whew.
Yeah, that's... Whew. And that's so much money. And I think this is because they really went all out on the production staff. So the music and lyrics were written by Bono and The Edge. So that's obviously.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. This might be a hot take. I don't like Bono.
Me neither. I don't either. Thank you. And he wrote a bad musical. I'm about to tell you all about it. But the music was written by him and the lyrics, which means he has some control over what the characters are saying, which, Lord help us. And so here's where we enter as well a very famous Broadway writer, Julie Taymor. And she worked on the book for the musical along with Glenn Berger and Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. And so I understand how this might be a little confusing when I say the book. The book, I just mean the spoken lines that characters are saying to each other in between songs. Bono and The Edge are doing what they're singing. Julie Taymor, Berger, and Aguirre Sacasa are working on what the characters are speaking. And the reason Julie Taymor is brought on is because she is, first of all, a huge name in Broadway. And she is known as the woman who brought The Lion King to life on Broadway.
And that is such a good show.
Yes, it is. I highly recommend it. I've seen it twice. It's very fun. It's so fun. And I've heard on Broadway, it's incredible.
Yeah, I saw it in Chicago. I didn't get to see it in New York, but
yeah, I saw it.
It was so good, and I was probably like 12 when I saw it. Maybe I was a little bit older. But it was just so impressive.
Yeah, because we'll talk a little bit about touring here, and I know that you know a little bit about it because we talked about in our previous engagement about what touring might entail. But the Lion King tour is great. It's still good. It doesn't have to be. Is it awesome in a Broadway house? Absolutely. But does it tour well and still look just as good? Yeah. So, hence Julie Taymor. And she's also directing Turn Off the Dark.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's not only working on the book, she's directing. And so these investors had every reason to believe that this would be a hit. And Turn Off the Dark had a lot of potential. I'm not going to say it was rotten to the core. There's potential there. Unfortunately.
Yeah, well, Spider-Man's always just going to be popular. Like, if you can create a Spider-Man musical, people are going to enjoy it.
Right, because it's a well-known character, it's all about what they're doing. That is just a shame, because I do think it had potential, because unfortunately it was also, in my opinion, and remember, my views do not represent my union, I think that too much was taken on in this production.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Just with the theme of Spider-Man itself, like, that would be really hard, and you'd want to do as much as you can.
Yes. So we're working with too many visuals, too much movement, and too much flight rigging. And we're going to talk. Flight rigging can be some of the hardest work a stagehand can do.
Oh yeah.
It's incredibly, it's dangerous.
Yeah, you're literally like holding somebody up from falling however many feet.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in a larger theater like Chicago downtown, you'd likely see the frame of the stage, which lots of it's called the proscenium arch. I got a BFA. And then the walls on either side are protecting you from seeing the stage crew, obviously. And in a large theater like this, it's also likely that it has rigging. And even if it's like a touring venue, like the Chicago downtown, they're still rigged.
They're prepared for whatever show may come in town.
Right, exactly. So not all theaters are equipped, but all large, like ones, especially ones that have touring productions come through. And we are lucky enough to be in a hub where a lot of Broadway musicals come to Chicago for their out of town tryout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have like 2 or 3 like dedicated Broadway theaters.
Yeah, and we'll talk about out of town tryouts too. Don't worry, I won't just leave that hanging there. But we're lucky but all that's rigged up. And when I say rigging, I mean it. It's ropes and pulleys and upper body strength. And each rope is labeled for what that particular one makes fly, quote unquote. To make sure it's the same every time, those pulling the rigging ropes mark the points on the rope when the performer is at the location up, where they want them to fly, and when they've come down, so they know that the actor is safe. This is usually done in spike tape because it comes in many colors, and often you'll have a rigging rope that flies maybe more than one thing, maybe more than one character, or works differently in a scene. So your rigging rope might have 3 or 4 colors on it, so you know where to pull. And I'm explaining all this in great detail so you can hear how really rough Turn Off the Dark was.
Yeah, well, that makes sense though. Like you need to be very careful with your color coordinating, for sure. But yeah, if you're doing a show, especially I imagine a show like Spider-Man, like I don't really know anything about the show itself, but like obviously I've seen some Spider-Man movies and seen some comics.
Right.
But like obviously the character has to like fly from building to building and use their web, and you have to do a ton of movement, and there's probably a good amount of the show where somebody's up in the air for a good amount of time.
Yes. And every part of that I hate, because there are, like I said earlier, far too many aerial sequences in this show. And I understand that it's Spider-Man and he has to fly, but we're going to talk about why it should not have been so many. And leading into this, you said, you don't really know the show. Turn Off the Dark has become the biggest benchmark theater fiasco I've ever seen in my working days. And one time I had a turntable literally pull the facing off the set in a live show.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've had audience members have heart attacks and heat strokes during shows. And I would take that a million times over working on Turn Off the Dark.
Wow.
Yeah. So opening night of the show was continually pushed back because they can't get it together. And we'll talk. There are quotes here where we see why it's getting pushed back. And it's just like unfortunate that nobody is really grasping like that this might not work out. But critics latched on to that, releasing reviews of the quote unfinished production. After these reviews, they're in previews. They're in previews for like ever is the thing, which is also weird. That's not
and preview
normal.
is to like get, it's like select people can come see it. A lot of journalists.
Correct.
And it's to just kind of do run throughs of your show from front to back in full costume, everything. And movies will do that too, where it's like you need to like do a test audience and that sort of stuff. That's essentially previews.
Yeah, you've got it 100% right. And typically, I can tell you in every show I've ever worked on, there has been 1 week of previews.
Yeah, I think 1 week. I think I've seen them be 2 weeks before, but that it's like that's long.
Yeah, 2 weeks is long. And so Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark spends, I think in total more than 6 weeks in previews and pushing back dates. Yeah, it's very bad. So their opening night keeps getting pushed back. And then they show finally this sort of unfinished thing to the critics, which I can't fathom why they did that. Because after these reviews, Spider-Man again suspended performances for another month as they, quote, retooled the show.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
Yeah. If you're using the word retool, that implies to me that you're taking the whole thing apart and putting it back together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens. Because this is when Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa was brought into the production team. He's a long-standing writer of Spider-Man comic books.
Okay.
Yeah, they bring in Roberto. He's there to fix and retool, quote. It's just a way, like we just said, to skirt around saying that the show was bad. So he was meant to fix both the book and the music. And this pings for me again, because that's a lot of workload to put on one person.
Yeah, it really is.
You're basically asking him to retool your entire show.
But the same, like it is a lot of work, but you're also bringing in who you would think would be really the best person for that job. Somebody who obviously knows the material.
Yeah.
And has created the material.
Yeah. He knows kind of what's going on. And then there's another development here. In the midst of these poor reviews of the not quite finished production, Julie Taymor was replaced as director by creative consultant Philip William McKinley.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't have any background on McKinley, but from what I know, what I've read in the media about Julie Taymor, I think it was probably the right decision to replace her on this show. Because if we're already retooling all the book and all the music, that sort of means to me that, I mean, Taymor was working on the book as well as directing.
Right.
So it kind of follows for me that she was replaced. And from what I've read in the media, she's sort of known for these big productions, that she brought The Lion King to life. She made this camel Spider-Man almost alive, kind of.
So do you think it was her pushing being potentially too big? Okay.
I do. In my humble opinion. And once again, it does not reflect the opinions of Actors Equity Association. Thank you. And here's where we run into another big red flag for me. Considering I've been working stage manager, house manager, and box office for approximately 14 years. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark opened in previews on June 14th, 2011. And it set the record for the longest time in preview performances, playing 182 shows in preview.
That's so many.
That is so many. I know we already discussed this, you guys, but let me reiterate. A preview is not considered a finished product. A preview is a performance where after the audience clears out, the production staff have a meeting regarding the tech of the show and then meet with the actors to give them notes on their performance prior to the opening night. You know, say a line a different way, exit slower, that kind of thing. So, just like Sam said before, it's essentially a big rehearsal from back to front, but with an audience.
Yeah, like you want to do it as if you were doing the full on show, but it also gives you a little bit of room to test things.
Yes.
So, like if you don't know how the audience might react to the tone of something or like a specific joke that you might want to reword, that's your time to make those adjustments.
Yes.
Before you go into your full run.
Absolutely. And you hit on a very good point, which is comedies. Previews are huge for comedies because you've got to know where that laugh lands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge, like I just said, it's a huge red flag for me. They were in previews for that long. And that's because as long as they're in previews, they can change any aspect of the show.
Yeah, like you can cut scenes out if you want. Like you can rewrite a scene and throw that in there or something like that. Like that's fully acceptable during previews.
Yeah. You could add like a whole nother rigging scene. You could. And so typically under every contract I've signed, I think I mentioned this already, I'll reiterate. Equity or non-equity working towards joining the union. Previews have lasted 1 week. And like Sam said, perhaps 2, especially if it is a musical comedy and we're working on where that laugh lands. Maybe 2.
And I think also a big part of it for why it was 2 for us was we only did shows 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm. So you want to keep that information kind of fresh.
Yeah, so it's like we're 3 days a week. Well, another theater might do a show a night. So I think that was a big reason for us to push the extra week.
Right. So that's, actually, I should explain that as well, because when you are a member of Actors Equity Association, depending on your contract, I don't know how it works on a Broadway scale. I think it works almost exactly the same way as it did in the tier I did, which is you work 6 days a week and your day off is Monday and you have a double show on Sunday. So a matinee and an evening. So we've got 7 chances for this show to go wrong every week. And you get one day, to recuperate from like, oh my God, what just happened?
Right. Especially when you're doing like such a physical show.
And so, so just again, this is a wild number, 182 shows in preview. That's something, there's something seriously wrong. And there was. The show opened like officially on January 1st, 2012. And it closed January 14th, 2014.
That's actually longer than I thought. I thought it was barely
on
Broadway. Like, didn't even last a few months.
Me too. I saw that number and I was like, wow, that's longer than I thought it did. But, so it spent nearly 5 months in previews. And when it closed, it was at a massive loss of money.
Oh, I'm sure.
As you can imagine, with how much it cost. $1.3 million a week just to make the show happen. Craziness.
Yeah, and it's like you're spending that much money, but you can make a lot of money in Broadway. Like those tickets are very expensive.
You can, yes.
But it gets split in so many different ways. You have the tickets. Well, that also has to go to the payment of the box office employees and like all that stuff. So you're getting a fairly small portion back. I shouldn't say a small portion. It's still a lot of money, but that's Broadway, not probably going to be covering the 1.3 million spend a week.
God, no. I can't imagine what thinking. I can tell you that just looking at these dates, this show was good. A little over 2 years on Broadway for something they banked would be a hit and baked to the tune of $75 million is not very good. You're looking at a loss, as we just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, if you have a hit on your hands that consistently pulls audiences, you're safe. For example, we're talking, like we just mentioned, Hamilton. We're talking another big one, Wicked. Both have become staples of Broadway, and I think that's what they were trying to do here with Spider-Man. And
right, like keep that like longevity going.
And I think every Broadway show wants that. You do want that. But I think they were trying to become like the next big hit, big thing happening. And they took big risks, not only with money, but with people's safety. And we'll get into that. And on November 19th, 2013, producers announced the show would close, citing failing ticket sales, which, yeah, I imagine. If you spend $1.3 million a week to make the show run, I can't imagine the ticket price.
Yeah, like you have to compensate for that somewhere.
Yeah. And it also cited something we've discussed here, which is no longer being able to get injury insurance for the production as reasons for the closure.
So their insurance company dropped them, essentially is what it sounds like.
Yes. Drop them like they were hot. Drop it like it's hot. Because this show is full of aerial sequences, and we're going to go through what happens. So again, they cite that as a reason for the closure. Like, yeah, we literally can't insure this anymore because people are falling out of the sky. And it ran for just over 3 years on Broadway and failed to make back its $75 million cost, obviously. And investors, according to the New York Times, reportedly were losing $60 million.
Oof.
Yeah.
So really, like when you're looking at it that way, they made 15 million.
Yeah.
On their 75. So it's like that's Ouch. Nothing for 4 years on Broadway.
Ouch. Yeah, it's bad. And then, so I'm going to throw a few quotes at you about Spider-Man, all of which are red flags to me, because each of these quotes is very different. According to Wikipedia, it's often described as a rock musical. The production, quote, treads new ground, end quote, that some commentators have asserted, quote, have effectively distanced it from its peers and cause some confusion when it comes time to describe the show, end quote. So that's a problem. The Edge said he was unsure how to describe the production, saying it had elements of rock and roll, circus, opera, and musical theater.
Okay, I kind of see where he's coming with that, though.
Yeah, and then Bono enters the chat, admitting that his description is a little, quote, pretentious. Shocking.
It sounds like Bono.
What? Get out. He referred to it as, quote, pop-up pop art opera, end quote.
I feel like he's just kind of throwing some well-known terms at us right now. Like pop-ups are all the rage.
That doesn't mean anything to me. I've worked in this business for 14 years, and the only word that I understood that you just used to describe this is opera, and you're talking about Spider-Man. I'm so confused. This is not good. And Bono also said the director, Julie Taymor, called it, quote, a rock and roll circus drama, end quote.
So she sounds like she's on the same page as The Edge.
Right. So Julie and The Edge are kind of on the same page. Bono is like in the same book, but he's like on the first page because he's Bono. And commentators are lost. Commentators don't have the book. The book is gone from the library. They don't know how to describe this thing. And if you can't agree on the basic description of the show and what you're trying to share with the audience, you're already in deep trouble. You should know that message you want to send at the first rehearsal.
Well, especially for a show like Spider-Man, because you don't really know what to expect out of Broadway musical about Spider-Man. Like, it can go in
Yeah.
so many different directions. It can be amazing. It can be terrible.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to be able to give something to your potential audience to get them to want to check it out. And if
Right.
you're sending mixed messages, people are going to lose track of it and not be as interested.
That they are giving these quotes after the official opening of the show. They're saying all this after it opened. Tells me that the whole process was very chaotic. Is it a rock opera? Is it a musical? Is it a circus drama? What is this? Start there. And unfortunately they did.
Yeah, like even if it was something different, like right now, Six, the last few years, Six
Yes.
has been incredibly popular. I personally have never seen it, but I'm very interested just because I hear so many people who have seen it give me essentially the same synopsis.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
interesting. And so it's like it caught their eye and they're able to portray that to me
Right.
for me to take interest in it and want to see it.
Right. And, you know, this is a good spot for me to just insert a quote from my husband, the mad artisan, who's also an audio engineer. His big thing when he goes to a musical or anything like that is that you should leave that musical humming a tune.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You should have a tune that sticks with you. You should not be confused about what you just saw. Because here's what you see. We're going to move on. So, because, like I said, what is it? Start there. They didn't. So let's move on to what they did, which did not turn out the best, in my humble opinion, once again. Early on in the production process, they described the musical as, quote, the most technically complex show ever on Broadway, with 27 aerial sequences of characters, multiple, I added that, flying and engaging in aerial combat, according to the New York Times. Big red flag here. All of that is a parade of red flags for me because 27 aerial sequences is too many.
Do you know the show that had the most aerial sequences other than Spider-Man? How many that was?
I don't because this is just so many that it's so far beyond.
It is, and that's why I'm trying to I want to know how much it was before, because if you're thinking about this, 27 aerial sequences, shows probably about 2 hours long on average.
Yeah.
That's a typical Broadway show. That's one every 4 minutes, 3 minutes. That's a lot.
And I'm going to address a lot of this statement because, again, I can't express enough that my views do not represent equity, but I can tell you that aerial cues are usually reserved for set pieces, flying in and out, which we'll discuss as well. However, here we're talking about putting performers in the air. Characters, plural, they said.
Yeah, and doing combat in the air.
Yes. So you typically would see this in, of course, Peter Pan or Wicked or something of that sort, where there are very limited flight cues. And that's for one reason.
That's for the big scene that happens.
Right. You know, Peter Pan takes them to Neverland. Elphaba rises before intermission singing Defying Gravity, you know? But you don't see 27 aerial sequences. And that's, in my opinion, because of the assumption of risk you take when you are putting performers in the air. It's dangerous. Even with trained stagehands who operate every day, it can be dangerous.
Well, you're also thinking about compare it to a movie. A movie, you have stunt doubles. You have people who are educated in how to handle exactly what is about to happen to their body and how to protect themselves in the absolute best way possible. These actors aren't trained as stunt doubles. Some of them might be very talented in that, but that's not their job.
Right. And I'll share here, you're 100% correct. That's not their job. Because Spider-Man does have a stunt double in this musical.
Oh, does he? Interesting. I've never heard of that for a show before.
we're going to hear from him because he was trained and what happened to him on this set. So it's liability. We just talked about it. Their insurance company dropped them because 27 aerial sequences, I'll leave to your imagination the risk undertaken and the liability that brings.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Christ. And so they also address, and we've talked a little bit about the performers engaging in aerial combat. And this is potentially one of the most dangerous things I've heard in my career. We already know that flying is dangerous. And when any kind of combat occurs on stage, a fight choreographer is brought in to supervise the actors and follow exactly the description. They are to instruct the actors in how to appear to the audience that they are fighting. It's essentially like a little dance, you know?
Yeah, and it's very important when you're doing that to be very consistent with it, because you're doing it with somebody else. You both need to be in the perfect position each time to create that illusion and to not harm each other.
Correct. And so typically, mostly I've ever seen, all of this occurs with the performers with their feet firmly on the ground. I honestly can't tell you how they would even begin to choreograph this, quote, aerial combat with everyone rigged up.
Yeah, that'd be so hard.
It would be impossible unless they rigged the fight choreographer too. And even if they did, flying is so unpredictable. The ropes could be just slightly off mark and someone could end up really getting hit.
Well, there's so many more factors included. So obviously you have the rig, you're in the air, but if you're off by like a quarter of an inch on your rope, well, that makes a big difference. And you have somebody manually adjusting that.
Right. And if you're doing, I don't know, I'm imagining Spider-Man. If you're doing a flying kick and your rope is a little off or you're in the wrong position, you might accidentally kick somebody right in the stomach.
Or if you have like too much momentum or something like that.
Yeah. It's all so dangerous. And the performers might completely miss their fight cues, confusing them as to where in the fight they are, which is another great way to get hit. Because if you get momentum like that and you lose where you are in the pattern of the choreography you've been given, it's another great way for a mistake to happen. And basically doing all of this in the air is a great way to get your performers to accidentally hit each other rather than the choreographed move of the punch missing but appearing to hit. So a lot of these paragraphs start with red flags for me, but here's another one. So let's dissect this statement given about Shirt Off the Dart. Quote, the production also includes a multitude of moving set pieces that put the audience in the middle of the action and enough projections onto giant screens that Bono has said that it is like a three-dimensional graphic novel, end quote.
That's kind of cool to call it a three-dimensional graphic novel, but terrifying. Like, if it's done well and safely.
It's a great idea. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. A three-dimensional graphic novel? That sounds cool. However, we're talking real people in the air, flying through the air. And if you're talking full stage, giant screens, the quote was giant screens. You're talking full stage projection cues over actors who are fighting in the air. And multitudes of moving set pieces is not unusual at all. It wouldn't raise a red flag for me, except if we zoom out here. We have, quote, multiple moving set pieces and 27 different aerial cues.
Yeah, it's just like everything combined is a recipe for disaster.
Yes. On any production, the set itself can be dangerous, which is why actors are always taken on a thorough tour of the set prior to the first technical rehearsal and shown the tracks each set piece takes, the height of them, sees them move, etc. They get to stand on them. They get to dance on them. They get to tactilely understand what's happening.
Yeah, you have to.
So a multitude of moving set pieces is not news, but in this case, we're adding danger to an already risky situation.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that pings for me, and we're back to talking about out of town tryouts. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark had no out of town tryout, and this was due to its technical elements.
So if you're not willing to do an out-of-town tryout, the likelihood of you wanting to actually take it on tour is very slim.
So low. It's so low. If you can't do an out-of-town tryout, how do you think you're going to take it on the road? I don't know. I don't know. An out-of-town tryout is vital for any show that wants to transfer to Broadway. And like we said, they happen a lot here in Chicago. Recently, shows that have been tried out here include The Devil Wears Prada. Six, like we just mentioned, is a great rock musical about the wives of Henry VIII, right? Not the sixth?
Yep,
the
that's
eighth?
it.
The eighth, yes. Yes, it's the...
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And then most recently, The Notebook did their out-of-town tryout here. And they're doing very well on Broadway right now. I'm sure it's lovely. I didn't see it because I was afraid I was going to cry too much.
See, this also might be a hot take. I didn't like that movie.
That's okay.
Not my thing.
I just don't want to set myself up for an evening where I'm like, I'm going to go cry. I'm like, no, I'll just hang out at my house and worry about like general things around me and cry. I don't need to go watch The Notebook. But right. I've heard, however, Ingrid Michaelson wrote all the music for it.
Yeah.
And so I do like her. I like her music. I do. Mm-hmm. And I have not seen the show, so I cannot form an opinion, but most recently they did try out here. So it's very common. And all three of these that we just mentioned are musicals. Turn Off the Dark is also a musical.
And the big reason you want to do out-of-town tryouts, too, is you want the best person in that role. Yes. And you're limiting your pool so much by not doing that.
Correct. Sam raises an excellent point, which is when you do an out-of-town tryout, a lot of times actors will be replaced when the show transfers to Broadway.
Yeah, because it's also like, because Broadway has grown so much, it's like not everyone can just move to New York and live that life. Like it's important to be able to spread it out and to allow people to live the lives that they want wherever they want and still be able to do what they want with their talent and everything.
Exactly. And that is a difficult line to walk. And that is how I ended up here in Chicago and am stage managing less, because a lot of this demands so much of your time. 6 days a week, 7 shows a week. If you're a PSM, you're there first unlocking it, you're there last locking it up. And shows like this are transferring to New York, and what? I'm going to go and I'm going to live in a closet for 6 weeks while it runs on Broadway and then closes, and then I've got to come back and find another apartment in Chicago. Like, no, I have a life here.
Yeah, it's hard to just completely move your life. Like, obviously it's a big deal. Like Miguel Cervantes, he was Hamilton here in Chicago.
Oh my
Phenomenal
God.
Hamilton.
He's
so good. And then, oh my God, and he's just like the sweetest person.
He's
we
so
were lucky
nice
enough to meet him a couple of times, and just so wonderful. But once Lin-Manuel stepped down, he replaced him, and that was a big deal for him to go to New York and do that. So it's like opportunities like that obviously are great reasons to make those jumps and make those moves. But he also, in his example, he's resident.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a huge difference between being like, okay, I'm going to follow this show to Broadway. I've been chosen to stay in the cast. It's a new musical. I don't know what's going to happen. Whereas you're transferring to Hamilton, you're in a pretty good spot.
For years, it'll be playing.
Oh, yeah. just to reiterate what Sam said, fantastic Hamilton. Does a great job.
If you can go see him play Hamilton, trust me, it's absolutely worth it. I've seen him a handful of times, and it's always perfect.
Yes, do it. I have only seen him through the internet box do Hamilton. Never in person. However, like Sam said, we did have the privilege to meet and interact with him, and he could not have been lovelier. And I wanted to highlight that because a lot of the times actors aren't always.
Yeah, I think we met basically the whole cast, and every single person we met was amazing.
Oh my God, so nice. The nicest.
Like that it was something about Hamilton. Just something about it.
It was too big and too beautiful. Jeffrey Sellers, ladies and gentlemen. That was a quote. But you got to meet, didn't you? You got to meet Philip Bassoon, didn't you?
Yeah. I got to meet her.
I'm so jealous.
I got to meet a handful of people from the original cast.
I wasn't there that day.
Yeah, that was like day one. But yeah. I had to ask Lin-Manuel Miranda to move out of my way. Yeah, that was my one interaction. I had to like bolt through like a side door, and he was standing right in front of it. I'm like, I had to get through that.
Right, you're like, no, now's the time. Yeah, I got super lucky because I got to be his body man. He surprised the first audience who went through the entire experience.
Yeah, let's explain it a little bit because we have never told people that we worked at the Hamilton exhibition in Chicago, yes. Which was a pop-up. So it's like a room, like each room that you went into was a different part of Hamilton's real life.
Yes, and it was the size of an airplane hangar. I can tell you that. So that gives you an idea of the scale of these rooms. It was essentially, when we say a pop-up, it was a pop-up museum. Like
it was a full-on museum.
Mm-hmm. Every room in the exhibition was designed by
all there, but David Corns, and he also did Beetlejuice. He just finished Beetlejuice when we opened.
What's his name again?
David Corns.
David Corns. So David Corns, yes, the designer of the original set for Hamilton the Musical, designed each of these galleries, which we were posted through, and Sam and I were among the four. There were four of us? Yeah, something like that.
4 or 5, something like that.
4 or 5, but there were usually only like 2 or 3 of us there, and we're supervising the staff as they are rotating through the different galleries, so they're not standing in one room for 8 hours.
Yeah, and we were there to answer like most guest questions, so we just had to be very knowledgeable about Hamilton in its real life and Hamilton in the musical.
Oh my gosh, the questions.
And we weren't affiliated with Broadway. Like we didn't we technically worked for Broadway, but not Chicago and Broadway.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had workers who transferred from the Broadway production of Hamilton to work on the exhibition, but they were clearly all there for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, and then Joanne, what was her last name? Joanne?
Oh my goodness, the historian. She was wonderful. Yeah, she's
the one who wrote the book that inspired Lin-Manuel to make. She wrote that book?
She was the nicest.
Oh my gosh, her and I cried at the end of it together, like in the cafeteria.
I know, we cried. Like we did not want to. We didn't want to close. We didn't want to close.
So I have her book, but it's like out of my view. Her book is right on my shelf. I just can't see it, and there's a cat on my lap, so I can't move.
She was the nicest lady, and her name is Joanne Freeman. And she's a tenured professor of history and American studies at Yale University. And she has researched Alexander Hamilton independently and collaboratively for more than 40 years. And is regarded as a leading expert on his life and legacy, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, and she's truly like the sweetest, most genuine woman. But yeah, we had like a huge VIP event, and like that gave me. I'm not sure if it gave me a false insight into Broadway, but everyone was so just like down to earth and genuine and really excited to be there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's like typical or not typical,
I
but
think
I enjoyed it.
a lot of it is you hear people say like movies or TV shows. The person who is at the top of the call sheet sets the tone for
Mm-hmm.
the production. And in this case, and in most cases with Hamilton, the person at the top of that call sheet is always going to be Lin-Manuel Miranda. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that he's a wonderful human and a consummate caring boss, and I think he is letting the show become its own thing, but it's also just so iconic to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to meet his dad and spend some time with him
His
for a
dad,
while.
his dad was so nice.
Yeah, you could see why Lynn is the way he is.
So the out of town tryout is exactly where all the problems we've discussed so far are worked out, and the show is tested on an audience, much like a preview, but you're in a bigger city. You don't have like invited guests or press. You may have some press from that city, but it's more regular people. You're testing it out on the audience. And
Right.
had they done an out of town tryout instead of endless previews, they would have discovered sooner that the book and music needed, quote, retooling and Tamor should be replaced. If
Yeah, and
you
with doing the out of town tryouts, that's long before you get to previews.
mm-hmm,
And so like
mm-hmm,
it's kind of your
you
first
should have
round of
known.
previews.
Yeah, that's a really great time for you to realize this is not going well because it doesn't. If you have technical elements to keep you from an out of town tryout, and I was on the production team, I'd be very, very nervous. And
Yeah.
we already discussed why, because how are you going to tour that?
Well, and if you're going in with the expectation of like this is going to be the big new musical, it is going to be
Right,
on par with Hamilton, Six, like Kinky Boots, like stuff that have been on Broadway forever.
right.
You would expect them to do out of town tryouts, and if they're not, that is a huge red flag.
Huge red flag. And it seems like that's what they were expecting. Like it was just going to be this big thing that was going to sit in residence and, be a massive hit. And oh boy, did it need an out of town tryout. But I understand. I mean, not every theater is equipped for it. And that's because you shouldn't really do it. Because I've
Yeah.
told you enough about what a dangerous environment this was. I think it's time to move on to the damage this show truly caused. 6 people were injured on the set of Spider Man Turn Off the Dog. 2 stunt
That's a lot.
doubles. Yes, 6. 2 stunt doubles, presumably for the flight action sequences, were injured performing the aerial sequences demanded by the production. And they were only in rehearsal at this point when these
Oof.
2 stunt doubles were injured. So we can reasonably assume the production staff knew that what they were attempting was dangerous.
But did they change anything? Like, did they like that's the big thing. It's like, okay, people get injured. It's it is awful. There shouldn't be injuries, but if there are, how do you react to them?
Good question. I have an answer. This injury of 2 stunt doubles resulted in safety inspectors from the New York State Department of Labor reviewing these scenes. After viewing them in February 2011, they cited the production with 2 workplace safety violations regarding them. These citations also alerted the United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration, who fined the show $12,600 in March 2011 for 3, quote, serious safety violations, end quote.
Oh, wow. Do we know what the injuries were and how they happened?
Of the doubles,
Mm-hmm. Like, what did they drop? Did they fall? Did they collide?
I don't think we have it on these two. I just think they were injured, and it was enough that it regarded a serious safety violation, according to OSHA.
So that's also like a big thing. Like we talked about so many different variables being involved. Like, was it just an unfortunate error that was just one of them wasn't lined up perfectly? Like, there's so many different things that kind of
There's so many
impact
different
the
things.
situation. That it's kind of hard to make an exact judgment on
Yeah.
what happened because obviously we're not reviewing videos. Like,
Well, it's wild because there's so many variables. It could be any of them. I do have more specific reports on other performers who were injured and exactly how. But these are two separate ones that we don't have specifics for. However, we do know that they were bad enough that it alerted the New York State Department of Labor and then the United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And then Actors Equity Association also looked at the situation.
Did these two injuries happen at the same time? Like, was it during the same scene, or was it like two completely different instances?
I think it was during the same scene because it said they were injured performing the aerial sequences demanded by the production. And to me, the way I read that was they were both in the aerial sequence and potentially collided.
Yeah, in my brain, I'm like a collision or like a fall.
Yeah,
seemed most likely.
Yeah, what I think is a collision because we do have a fall here, and the fall is very well documented.
So the fall's the one thing I've heard about.
I think if they fell, it would have been much more well documented. However, they did likely, if they didn't fall, they likely collided and collided hard enough that we have three separate associations now. No, Actors Equity Association as well is now ended. Yes. So after they're cited for these, quote, serious safety violations, Actors Equity Association also looks into the situation. So we have three separate ones now, all like staring at us. And I cannot speak for what my union did here or what conversations were had. But again, it is clear that it was dangerous. More specifically, one stunt double for Spider-Man, Kevin Aubin, broke both his wrists performing a stunt for the show. He broke both his wrists. Another unnamed actor, and I assume they want to remain anonymous because this is in the New York Times. And theater can be toxic, and if you say anything or do anything or put your foot the wrong way, you don't know how people will turn on you. You don't. So they are listed as an unnamed actor and had, quote, broken his feet on the same move a month earlier, according to the New York Times. So same stunt, unchanged.
Well, it could have changed, but not well enough because if you broke both wrists versus both feet, maybe they changed like a landing or something.
Maybe.
But it wasn't, it was still, whatever component made it dangerous wasn't changed.
Yeah, I was going to say, whatever part of it was literally damaging their bodies was not changed. Because, we have this first unnamed actor who broke both his feet. And like you said, that could come from like a poor landing. Again, that's not on him. He may have been in an aerial sequence and flown down and landed wrong. It happens. It's dangerous. And then we have Kevin Aubin, double for Spider-Man, breaking both his wrists, performing that exact same stunt. So it may have been changed to where he rolled and he broke his wrists. Either way, yikes. Both extremities on both these actors.
Yeah, that's harsh. Like that's wrong. But that's
it's wrong. It's wrong. And here again, we have a demonstration of how certain aspects of this show were inherently dangerous, but were overlooked for what I can only guess is artistic license. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like they wanted to have this like spectacle. We're the only show
Yes.
that has done this many aerial sequences.
Yes.
And, like they
Yes.
wanted that moniker to
We
go
spent
along with that.
$75 million. We got Bono.
Yeah.
And now that was just two stuntmen who were injured on the show. So we have, wait, so hold on. Let's do a head count here. We have two stunt doubles who potentially collided, alerted all the agencies. Then we have another stunt double who broke both his wrists, and yet another unnamed actor who broke both his feet. So that is four performers, four stuntmen. They were all listed as stuntmen. So these are trained stunt people who are getting injured. Like, if in this case, they're putting a performer here, which is insane. So
Oof.
the actual performer who's injured, her name is Natalie Mendoza. And if you know the horror film Descent, she plays June. And our British listeners might know her too. She has best been known as Jackie Clunes in the British drama Hotel Babylon.
Oh, that's a great show.
Yes, that is Natalie Mendoza as Jackie Clunes. And she was on the set of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark when she suffered a concussion in
Oh,
previews for the show. Yes, a concussion. And she's in previews for the show. It's November 28th, 2010. She was struck in the head by, quote, equipment in the wings, end quote.
equipment in the wings. Was that like a sandbag or something? Like a weight?
This is obviously very bad. For me, this shows an irresponsible deck chief. Your stage right deck chief is your right hand man because often those moving set pieces that they're bragging about, they often come in from the right hand side of the stage. Stage right, audience left. I know it's backwards. So Mendoza was making her exit, and that deck chief either moved the piece too soon, which shouldn't happen because the production stage manager calls all cues for that piece to move. And if that's not what happens, it shows that the deck chief did not spike tape out where furniture and set pieces lived backstage.
Oh, so it was just like something that was like sitting back there that
Yes.
she ran into.
Yeah. Which shouldn't happen ever.
No, it shouldn't happen. I thought it was like because you know how a lot of those pulleys have a weight that gets lifted. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
did she hit her head on a moving weight?
She was struck in the head by equipment in the wings, and any equipment in the wings, in my experience, the deck chief. I've been the deck chief. I've been left deck chief. I've been right deck chief. I've been production stage manager in every show. The deck chief uses spike tape, which I mentioned before. It's a hardier tape that's difficult to pull up so you can roll things over it.
It's also it can be reflective, and that's why you use it. Is so like in the dark, you can see the outlines of where you need to avoid.
Correct. And like we mentioned with the rigging, it comes in many colors. So a lot of the times when you're taping out your backstage, first of all, the first thing you're going to do, if I'm the deck chief, if I'm right deck chief, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a huge white duct tape size roll of spike tape and I'm going to mark out the entire fire lane because a huge portion of your backstage needs to be available as a fire lane and
Mm-hmm.
they will check. They will. I've had multiple visits from the fire department just to make sure that that is correct.
Yeah, well, it's a really big deal if it's not.
Exactly. And then you move on from there because that is essentially your actor path now. That is where it's safe for them to walk. If it's not safe for them to walk there, if there's going to be a piece of furniture there, there should be another piece of spike tape around that piece of furniture, labeled with what piece of furniture goes there. That's just in my
Yeah, it's like
experience.
everything has its home, and every home is well marked.
Correct. That's the ethos. And that's another reason you take the actors on the walkthrough on the first day of set. So they understand where these things are in space because they're coming out of lights blasting into their face. So
Yeah,
they
it's like
need to
the moment
know.
they turn their head, it turns black once they step backstage.
Yes. And so frequently, glow tape is precious commodities. Uh, you glow almost, if you have any huge furniture, like that they're talking about here, like massive set pieces, I believe was one of the terms used. You need to glow all the corners of that. You need to glow because the performer needs to be able to see at least a dim light ahead of them to know that there's a large piece of furniture there.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, as you were saying earlier, it's so important to move things at specific times because it needs to be habit building because it is in the dark.
Mm-hmm. And that actor has gone through the rehearsal process doing the exit a certain way. And we need to create that transition in the tech period of when that PSM calls for the actor exits, the piece moves in. It should not be like, okay, she just disappeared from my line of vision, move in that giant, whatever the hell.
Right.
A lot of it is based on like instinct. Like, okay, she just left the stage. She probably saw the glow. She's probably in the actor path now. We're probably clear. You might even say to the deck chief, are we clear? And then the deck chief will respond to you, clear. And then you say, go. That's your primary word as the production stage manager. First word is standby. Your second word is go. And it's for projections, it's for furniture, it's for lights, it's for everything that is happening here. And in this case, they failed Natalie Mendoza incredibly by just improperly setting up the backstage. And so it's equally troubling because the right deck chief is, like I said, the right hand man. They're essentially in charge of the whole backstage area. They're supervising sort of the left. The left deck chief is typically not even on a headset communicating to the stage manager. The right is.
Right. It's like he's in charge of the other ones because he has to
Yeah.
then communicate further.
Yeah. So it's deeply troubling to me because it means, like, hold on, you're the deck chief, you're in charge of, you are my proxy here in charge of this crew. I am technically responsible for this entire crew, and you are not doing your job properly, which has resulted in a concussion and an equity actress. That is not well.
Right. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah. And Mendoza, she did not immediately report her injury. And I've seen actors do this before, perform with an injury, suffer an injury, that sort of thing. And some are reluctant to report because that means they may not be able to perform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want to perform. However, in this case, Mendoza was not only injured, she had a full blown concussion.
Yeah, like she needs to step away for her own health.
Yes, like she's a concussion. So on November 30th, 2010, 2 days later, Mendoza reported her injury. She was advised by a doctor not to perform. However, she did in the second performance. She was playing the role Arachne. This particular part had many flying scenes, including one where she is spun upside down.
That's not good. You don't do that.
No, because after this, Mendoza fell ill, and her understudy stepped in for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's really not good to do when you have a concussion.
No, upside down in the air with a concussion. No, 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 no. So her understudy stepped in for 2 weeks. Surprisingly, Mendoza went back to the production on the December 15th evening performance.
Wow.
You see what I mean? The actors really downplay their injuries, and it's always alarming to me, particularly if that injury resulted from the set. Any injury, regardless of the timeline of the production, from rehearsals to performances, must be documented by the production stage manager in an injury report that is reviewed by Actors Equity to determine if an actor is being overused or is in a particularly dangerous situation.
In an equity contract, would they lose money by not performing, or they get like a salary for a show?
That's a very good question. I think it depends on the tier of theater that you sign with, because you have Broadway and then you have off Broadway. In off Broadway, you might only get money if you perform.
Well, like in this case, this is Broadway. And the reason I ask is because is that part of the reluctancy to report? Because it's like, well, now I'm not going to have that paycheck coming in if I report this. I'll just deal with it.
I'm not sure. I think a lot of it is that performers just want to perform.
Well, I'm sure that's part of it too, or that's like an old mindset of like when they were working off Broadway. Like just kind of a interesting thought why so many people choose not to report their injuries.
It's these repetitive injuries actors get because of the things that they're demanded. And Mendoza suspended her performance on December 20th, 2010, due to yet another stunt performer being injured. Another stuntman for Spider-Man, Christopher Tierney, was injured and hospitalized during the performance.
So this is the one I've heard about.
Yes. Her understudy went back to work for her, and Mendoza announced her permanent departure from the show on December 30th, 2010. Mendoza was replaced by TV Carpio.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah.
She's so talented.
Yes, she was, Lord help her, flying in the air upside down. We hope she's okay. But she had the same understudy. Carpio had the same understudy Mendoza had. So when Mendoza is replaced by TV Carpio is also injured on the set.
Uh-oh.
And the understudy has to go on again, still performing in March 2011.
Poor understudy.
Oh my goodness. I have a line here about it, don't worry. And this led to Carpio withdrawing from the show for 2 weeks and her understudy performing. Understudies are the unsung heroes of any show. They learn one part they're assigned if they're an understudy. They study how the actor reacts to the music and sings songs. They take all the blocking, the stage directions, where the character moves. They learn all the choreography for the character. And in this case, get ready to be put in a harness.
And they're not always doing that for just one character.
Yes, exactly. There are different, I would bore you, but I won't get into it. Understudies are one particular role. There are also other members of the production who cover other roles, maybe perhaps multiple. And so you have a security blanket there. If and when someone gets hit in the head by the rigging.
Right. Like I know we've brought it up a few times, but one of the times I saw Hamilton, it was Miguel's understudy. He's fantastic as well. I unfortunately don't remember his name off the top of my head, but that was the first time I saw it. I didn't even know he wasn't the original Hamilton.
Yeah.
Like
the understudies are so good. They're so good. They learn every single. They spend essentially the same first day of a lead actress is the same first day of her understudy. Because she's shadowing her the entire time to make sure that show continues in the same fashion. So, still, this is a red flag. If actors are getting injured and the first performer misses where the audience laughs, where they pay attention, all of that, they're missing a good chunk of what's going on.
Yeah, it's hard to step in partway through.
Yeah. So, like, if the understudy has been performing for 2 weeks and then Carpio has to come back, it's like she's put in an awkward situation where a good chunk of what's going on The understudy knows where the laugh lands. She might not, that kind of thing. But we're going to move on to the most serious injury on Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And that is, we already mentioned, December 20th, 2010. Christopher Tierney, a double for Spider-Man. He had already been injured once on the set. The New York Times did not elaborate on that. But in this particular case, he fell on the set 21 feet.
That's a long way.
I checked, and that is nearly a 2-story fall.
Mm-hmm.
So after suffering 4 broken ribs, a hairline skull fracture, a broken shoulder blade, a bruised lung, 3 cracked vertebrae, and broken bones below his elbow as a result of the fall, according to his father.
Oh, wow.
All results in criminal. Yeah. That is so, his whole body, that is such a traumatic injury to his entire body.
Oh, it absolutely is.
This is the part that makes my head want to explode. Tierney fell off a set piece when his harness was not properly attached to a safety cord.
Wait, what?
Yes,
like, you don't go out there unless you're attached.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. His harness was not properly attached. Without this basic element of any show where someone flies, it left Tierney to free fall through the stage all the way down to the orchestra pit. Yeah. The orchestra pit typically lives under the stage, a little bit out. You guys might see him every so often. So he fell far. And he was hospitalized at Bellevue. Shout out. We did an episode on that. And he was released with the condition of rehabilitation on December 28th, 2010.
So he spent over a week in the hospital.
Yes. Because I can't imagine that all of those injuries, the vertebrae injury is extremely troubling. You could have back problems the rest of your life. A hairline skull fracture.
Yeah, no, all of it's terrifying.
Yeah, your shoulder blade, like this poor man. And I literally, the next thing is, this is just beyond the pale. I don't understand this at all. How did that crew not make sure that his harness's safety cord was not attached properly? This is day one stuff. Theater Tech 101. Secure your
I've never
actors.
worked on a show that does any sort of stunts, but I know this. Like, this is the first thing that you should always be doing, is checking them.
This is Theater Tech 101. Secure your actors and make sure you're safe. And make sure they're safe. This was not done by any means. I mean, the man was injured once already prior that we don't have more information on. And now he's fallen 21 feet because he cannot trust his crew. It's paramount that everyone in the production trusts each other. Mm-hmm. They trust the other performers to do their part as rehearsed, and they rely on the trained crew directly linked to the production stage manager to call cues for set pieces and large furniture. They rely on the PSM to keep them safe. That's the PSM's job. We are there representing the union and therefore must act as such. And it's here I'm going to mention another theaterism. It's called the, quote, curtain of fire, if there's an emergency like this. And you're using the main drape curtain. When you walk into a theater, you see the big red curtain, right? So if there's an emergency, such as Tierney falling 21 feet, the show is stopped and the curtain is pulled. And the PSM is the one who stops the show. That's your job. Everything and everyone behind that curtain is the PSM's responsibility to take care of. Everyone in front of that curtain, confused, probably scared, riled up patrons, is to be taken care of by the house manager. That's just how an emergency reacts. So,
well, and with all of this is a well-oiled machine, and Broadway as a whole is a well-oiled machine. In reality, this stuff isn't different from show to show. It's different just because things are in different places and you're working with different people, but the job is the same. You have the same roles and you have the same responsibilities each time. And I understand, like, okay, Spider-Man's going to be introducing a new element of that with more aerial scenes and different things. But the machine itself still has to run the same way.
Correct.
That can't change.
Correct. And that's, I know I just used the word paramount, and both of these things are paramount. It's A, paramount that you trust your crew, and B, it's paramount as a production stage manager that you make sure that that show runs exactly as it was rehearsed every time. So stuff like this does not happen. After Tierney's fall, the show was paused yet again to better rehearse safety procedures with the harnesses, which is beyond me. Yet again, my views do not represent equity, but there were 5 weeks of previews, and the show was pushed back several times. Why was a large chunk of that time not devoted to making sure the aerial scenes were safe and the crew could properly attach harnesses?
Yeah, like this era should not have been possible if they had done that.
No, because then the show resumed with these new, quote, safety procedures for the evening performance of December 30th. So
it took them like a week.
Yeah, and a week and a half, and then you're opening with new safety procedures that you had 5 weeks of previews to figure out, but you were too busy focusing on like the high, shiny new toy that we're going to put on Broadway instead of the safety of everyone on that deck.
And it's been running for about a year at this point. You said January of 2011 it opened. And this is December.
Okay. Yes.
So this should have all been fully completed.
Oh yeah. Because this is with the new safety procedures, we're safe now. On December 30th, we're now safe. But this makes me shake my head and wonder what was going through their minds, because we have 2 stuntmen seriously injured and one of the performers sustaining a concussion. This show, in my opinion, should have been scrapped then.
Yeah, but they're saying we spent too much money, we need to make more.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so Tierney was released from New York University's Rusk Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine on January 5th, 2011. He then resumed his role in the show.
Oof.
Again, you see what I mean? When actors want to perform, they'll perform. And then Tierney, surprisingly again, said, quote, "I'm not worried about it, of the safety concerns surrounding the show."
Braver than I am.
Hell yeah. Braver than me. Yeah. I'm not really worried about it. He said of the safety concerns surrounding the show. Quote, "They've got it well taken care of." And I am going to agree to disagree with Tierney here, because he actually participated in the show. But in my humble opinion, this show does not have safety well taken care of.
Well, I'm curious what their changes were.
Yeah, what?
Because like he might look at them and be like, okay, I understand that, like how that works, and I think that's the right way to do it. Maybe he is more comfortable with it that way. I don't know,
but and also we should remember he is, in this case, a trained stuntman.
Yeah, exactly. Like he knows the ins and outs of the physics that go into it. So he's very well possibly seeing something that we don't know, where he's like, that's the correction to the issue.
Yeah, we don't have visibility on that, and we obviously don't have visibility on how his body healed, but I can't imagine with those injuries just sounded so traumatic, and to return so quickly,
it makes me nervous. Like
it would make me extremely nervous.
I probably need more time.
It would make me extremely nervous, and in my opinion, I don't think this show had safety well taken care of. But Christopher Tierney's opinion is more important than mine, because he was the one there, and he returned to Turn Off the Dark for rehearsals on April 25th, 2011, and he performed on opening night for the show.
Wow.
Yeah, wild. And so here's just some other injuries to recap. Carpio, performing as Arachne, injured her neck during a March 16th, 2011 performance, leading to her withdrawal from the show for 2 weeks. On August 15th, 2013, performer Daniel Curry, who played the villain, but he also acted as a stunt double for Spider-Man, was hurt by being trapped under a set piece, causing him leg trauma. And not just bruising Curry, got his right foot stuck in a stage lift, and then a trapped door closed on the foot, breaking the foot and both of his legs, necessitating, quote, unspecified amputations, end quote.
Wow. And those are like hydraulic a lot of the time.
Yes.
Or mechanical.
Yes. You're 100% correct. Hydraulic, mechanical. They will close if your foot is there or not. And this all makes me want to pull my eyebrows out, for the record. Like,
yeah, and like for those
I can't
things,
believe that.
You want them to be flush with the stage too, because it's basically opening like a door where it like goes down.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you need it, like, especially when you have dancers and stuff on the stage, you can't have something being like a indent in or raised up a little bit. It needs to be completely flat. And so like they're designed to make sure they get to that level regardless.
Yeah. This is just so bad. Like, I don't know how they didn't close right then. Unspecified amputations on one of your performers due to your show.
Yeah, that very well could mean they can never perform again. Like,
yes, exactly.
What it's like a couple toes that potentially make you never dance again. Like,
well, it was his whole foot. It broke his whole foot and his legs.
Yeah, but I mean like unspecified amputations. Like I'm assuming it's probably a couple of toes.
Probably, yeah. And but that's like you said, balance, whole thing. I mean, and the way you move. I mean, the way you move your body is going to have to change. Everything. Yeah. So the show's first performance on November 28th, 2010, quote, garnered what was most likely the most press coverage of a first preview in history, end quote, according to Broadway World.
But I wouldn't be surprised by that either, though, because you want like that was during previews 2010, so you want this to be a successful show and want all of that aerial work to pay off for itself. So I can understand it having a lot of press coverage.
Yeah. And I mean, word was probably flying around about it. You know, people were probably talking about it. Doesn't surprise me. During the first full week of 2011, Spider-Man had the highest box office gross on Broadway with a total of $1,588,514.
So they made $300,000 because they spend 1.3 a week.
Yeah.
You made 1.6, you spend 1.3.
Yeah. I literally said the next thing in the script is, that sounds great. People like it. Remember though, this is a dangerous show with elements risking a performer's injury. And also what Sam just said, everything upvote. The New York Times' Patrick Healy had a different opinion and stated in February 2011 that Spider-Man had become, quote, a national object of pop culture fascination, more so perhaps than any show in Broadway history, end quote.
I get that though, because that was right after Iron Man came out.
Action was big.
Yeah, that was like kind of the start of that whole universe. And so I totally understand why it had such a fascination, why people were like flocking to it.
That's why I said at the beginning, like I really do. Listen, I am dogging this because there are aspects of this. This is the only thing I know, you guys. I'm a baby podcaster. I barely know how to podcast. I know how to stage manage a show, and this is not how you do it. But this show had potential. Like it did. It did.
Yeah, well, it has enough of a following just by name alone, but it could have been great.
There are ways this could have worked. Also, this big culture fascination is due to the media coverage. There's late night comedians doing monologues on the musical's many delays and injuries and creative issues. And Healy speculated that the musical would not have staying power through repeat viewings like other hit musicals after, quote, tourists and parents with children watched it for, quote, bragging rights at dinner parties or on the playground.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like it's probably not one that gets repeat views as frequently as many of the others we've mentioned. Like you go see it once and then you go see another
I would agree. Yeah. As I said before, this show didn't look like it had staying power to be a Broadway staple. First, it's too expensive to run every week. They're burning money, and injuries are resulting in fines and visits from several workers' unions, including AEA, which was designed to protect professional actors and stage managers. And about half its audience came from beyond the New York metropolitan area, including many foreign tourists. In November, its producers stated that the show earned about $100,000 to $300,000 in net income each week.
Yeah, that fits with that opening week that we saw.
Yeah. Which means that Spider-Man would have had to continue playing for at least 5 years to recoup the $75 million cost.
And with how they have to pay for insurance,
Yeah.
all the money that they are making is going to that.
And the fines that they're getting because they're not listening. Mm-hmm. And as I just said above, they were never going to recoup a $75 million musical when they're burning $1.3 million every week the show plays.
Yeah, no way.
No. However, the first week of January 2012, the Broadway League reported that the show had taken in $2,941,790 in ticket sales the week before. The highest single week gross of any show in the history of Broadway. It even beat out Wicked, which is now a staple, which we discussed.
That's interesting they made that much. That's like
Christmas
I know.
Week. Yeah, that's like Christmas. So, however, by the last week of September 13, sales declined, and we're talking to the tune of just $621,960.
So they're not even reaching half of what they're spending.
Yes, bad. And we've already discussed how in a theater you have to fill seats, and Turn Off the Dark just wasn't doing that. And the investors in the show were estimated by Vulture.com to have lost $60 million, as we discussed about this show.
Do we know who was backing it? Or was it like private investors or something like that?
No, I don't know who was backing it. Wish I knew. But I'm going to wrap this up with some of the financials I found broken down on Vulture.com. So renting the theater for the show cost them $4,373,375. And remember, they had a 5-week preview period. They're paying that monthly.
Okay, I was going to ask them, like, was that throughout their whole run, or is that?
No, they're paying that monthly. Yeah, that's just for them being there.
That's about right. Yeah, I see it.
Big Broadway theater. And the biggest amount spent after that was on sets and costumes. $9,662,885. And I would think, logically, with that amount of money, they could build sets for actors that are safe.
Right. I actually expected that number to be a whole lot higher, and it should have.
Me too. Yeah. All of this is a lot of money, but in comparison, they spent $2,215,047 on flying rigs and harnesses. And if all that money was spent, every nickel, why did Christopher Tierney fall the way he did? He could have died, and he was seriously injured. And the show also accrued $1,157,108 in legal fees due to their unsafe practices, and I imagine other negligence claims, other suits. That's all just in legal fees.
I say that's like nothing though for legal fees. Like legal fees are so incredibly expensive. That couldn't be like any outcome of any lawsuit or anything. That has to be just like your lawyer, and that's it.
Yeah. Probably because your lawyer just has to go in there and be like, oops, yeah, this is totally our fault.
Yeah, that's just paying them to file the paperwork. Because that number is so low when it comes to a big lawsuit or anything. That's like you can pay that as like a normal person if you're involved in a big lawsuit.
Right.
A company like Broadway with what they're dealing with, that really is filing paperwork money.
They have $75 million to spend. So that's, change. But also, in an interesting technicality here, they paid Julie Taymor $125,000 to direct. And when she was fired in March 2011, she continued to receive royalties for the show, totaling $9,750 that she was to be paid every week.
Well, I'm assuming her name is still on it because she was involved in writing the book. Even if they made alterations to it, her name is still on it because she was involved.
Yes, I imagine it's a lot like when you read a scientific paper and like the first investigator is listed first, and then in descending order of contribution, authors are added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the royalties make sense to me. I think that's pretty normal.
So they're still paying Julie Taymor, but just a few more financials for you on why this thing messed up, and we'll finish. As we discussed, to run the production weekly, it was $1.3 million. To put that in perspective, musicals can run between 10 and 15 million on Broadway. The Book of Mormon costs $9 million, according to the New York Times.
Not a great show.
It grossed pretty high the beginning week of December 25th, 2011, pulling in $2,940,000. However, by the last week in September 2013, it was pulling just $621,960. So the writing was on the wall for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And the problem is not only in Spider-Man, though. We've touched on this slightly. Ticket prices for Broadway shows have skyrocketed. The average price of a Broadway ticket is $100, according to Broadway League. And that could price theater goers out of the market, making it more likely that the most costly shows will have a tough time making up the costs.
I feel like $100 is cheap for a Broadway ticket. Every time I look, I feel like there's so much more than that.
Exactly. I think they're listing like the cheapest ticket you can get on Broadway.
Yeah, maybe they're including like I know we do it here where there's the ticket lottery. Maybe they're including even like things like that to average it out. So it's like $25 for the ticket lottery.
Producer Stephen Hendel told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "I think there's no question that rising prices on Broadway are problematic."
I agree.
Yeah, it prices out the people who may want to see new work, like things like A Strange Loop, the new show. Like it won a Pulitzer, and if I'm not mistaken, it closed like so fast.
Well, it also makes it like people want to see these big name shows, so they're saving their money. They're not spending their money on a more affordable show like that because they can't do both. They have to choose one.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's just so many of the theater going public want to see the same shows over and over and over.
Hey, I've seen Hamilton like 4 times.
No, yeah, I was going to say, I am in a glass house right now because I have watched Schitt's Creek maybe like 38 times at this point already through. It's the best television show I've ever seen. But this does exactly what the Broadway League said and prices out young people with only a little bit of money to spare, like you just said. And it remains dominated by an audience that's mostly white and older with pocket money. But I'm thrilled to see the renaissance of shows with multicultural casts and the casting of multicultural performers in roles previously only played by white performers. Like, I love it. I love it.
Well, theater should be for everyone. Like it. Like that's it. For everyone. If you want to be involved, you can be involved.
It's like justice. It's for everyone. And we used to, at the beginning, at the theater I equity PSM'd at, the artistic director usually gave the curtain speech almost every single show. She was that involved. And she always said, theater is a communal experience. And our work is not complete without you.
Yeah, because you're not going to put on a show for an empty room. Like, people do because people are passionate about it. But it gets better when you have an audience. And so you have to, the audience works with the actors and their responses, things like that. Like it is everyone collectively coming up with this product.
Right. It leads to the oft repeated phrase of representation matters. It matters so much. I'm so here for it. Like roles that were only white performers before, recast them, do it now. And like we've been talking about this whole time, I actually put it in here. Musicals such as A Strange Loop, which is unabashedly queer and multicultural. And in fact, its writer, Michael R. Jackson, won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Drama for A Strange Loop.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, new work. I don't know if you're eligible for the Pulitzer, if you're doing a revival. I imagine not.
Yeah, I don't know.
In short, I have hope. I hope that nothing like Turn Off the Dark is ever produced again, because your actors are your responsibility, and that includes taking care of them, and their safety is paramount. I hope more shows like A Strange Loop are produced, where they don't need flashy aerial sequences. They just have a good, plain good musical. That, my friends, is the story of Broadway's Spider-Man fiasco. Sam, any final thoughts?
I agree with that, where it's just like there's so many shows out there that I don't think we need to add something that extreme to the mix, because there's so many incredible shows out there that don't get the attention.
There's so much happening.
Yeah, and I know I've spoken on this a bit before, but I studied theater in London, and my classes were to go to shows that we went to like 3 or 4 a week when I was there.
Didn't you go to the Globe?
Yeah, we went to the Globe. We went up to Stratford and the Shakespeare Company up there.
That's so cool. That sounds so fun.
Oh, it was amazing.
Such a dork.
But like I had, that was my first time really kind of experiencing such a large variety of types of shows. I've seen a lot of Broadway as a kid. We went every couple of years. Anytime there was a big show in Chicago, we would try to go.
Oh yeah, because you were really close. Yeah, see, I was in Cleveland. I was stranded.
Yeah, and my grandmother loves the theater. So if if there was a show she wanted to see, we would go.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, so I've been very lucky in my life to see a good amount of Broadway in Chicago. But it wasn't until I started going to Fringe Theater in London that it blew me away.
Fringe Theater can be incredible.
Oh, it was amazing, some of the stuff that we saw.
Shout out Chicago Theater, Jackalope Theater Company. I worked for them as an ASM right before I took my equity card on a brand new show. I don't know if it's been produced more yet, but it was all about Benjamin Franklin. And cool. It was fascinating. I had my father-in-law who loves history come, and he had just the best time. There's so much out there.
Yeah, and I would love to see more theater become more accessible and like these Broadway prices. Mm-hmm. Like, I love Broadway. Mm-hmm. I love going to Broadway, but like they're not reasonable. And because of the amount of money spent on these huge shows, that's why those prices keep going up.
Yeah.
And it's hard justification when the show turns out like this.
Yeah, it's so hard to justify, and it's tricky where we are too, because it's like out of town tryout. So you're paying for the ticket that might be a little pricey, and the musical might turn out not that good. So you're kind of taking a risk there, but also you'll probably have fun.
I'd say it'll still probably be a good show, regardless. Yeah. Just because it's live theater, and live theater is exciting and fun and different. Like it can be different from day to day, and that difference could be an audience reaction, and that's a fun reason to go see things multiple times. But yeah, I agree. I wish this worked, because I think it is a really cool idea for a show, but you need to figure out a way to do it without that extreme risk.
Yeah. It's just, we said the long and short of it very early on, which is they essentially couldn't even get insurance for this show.
Yeah, that's a big deal, because like I'm assuming they were insured when he fell, but imagine if they weren't, and they wouldn't be spending $1 million on legal fees.
No,
no way.
And they cited that to the New York Times as part of the reason for the closure. They literally could not insure this.
Yeah, they would be spending probably well over $100 million, a lot, just for that lawsuit, because they would lose.
Yeah, so much money. And when you think about it, like the numbers that I read that a normal Broadway show costs, think of that $75 million. How many new like things we could have gotten, like a strange loop, like Come From Away. Like we could have gotten so much. And I do still agree that the show had potential there. I wish it could have worked. It did not work patently.
I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back at some point with big changes, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think people would like a superhero show like that.
Yeah, I agree. If there are significant changes made in the aerial sequences, particularly, if there's some other way to do that, I think that there's a ton of potential
Absolutely.
for it to work. A ton of potential.
Well, thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Spotify. You can also find us on Instagram, Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok, HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutthiscase@gmail.com. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Bye.